From MOCs to willow pumps, RVUs to blowouts. If you know exactly what I'm talking about, you're probably a physician mom, and this podcast is definitely for you. Welcome to Stethoscopes and Strollers. I'm Dr. Toya, an OBGYN and coach, and like you, I'm juggling life in scrubs with tantrums and timeouts. Here we get each other on a level no one else can. Conversations will be real and 100% unfiltered, so you might choose to listen while you're alone, or at least put in your AirPods. It's time to feel understood, supported, and a little less alone. Let's get into it. And I don't know what I was expecting him to say, but I definitely wasn't expecting him to say, well, if you go alone, this will be the end of us. And he's like, we are going to go together and we're going to figure this out. So I was like, okay, fine. I didn't even have the energy to fight it. I guess I expected him to not care. So I was a little bit surprised. But I was like, okay, fine. Let's go together. So I called my other sister and was just like, well, mom doesn't want to go to Cabo anymore. And can you just come up and stay with the kids with her? And Ade and I are just going to go. And she moved things around and came up. Of course, she knew something was going on, but I, made it seem like it was just mom. We bought her ticket and she came. And we went to Cabo, and it was like my body just knew, like it got to its tipping point and just started to break down. I started getting diarrhea the day before we even left. And it just continued through the entire trip. It was just like, I need to get all of this anger and resentment out by any means necessary. So we went and set up couples therapy. And we used an app that was terrible. The therapist that we found was really bad. She spent the entire 45 minutes talking about herself, didn't really ask us any questions. And we both ended and looked at each other like, yeah, we're not doing that again. And that actually brought us closer together, that experience of having this terrible therapy appointment. But it wasn't, all laughs and giggles. There was still the elephant in the room that we had to deal with. So my husband actually went online and found some questions, like therapy questions for us to therapize ourselves. And we went through them and answered them about, how we were feeling and what we saw for our future, and really actually started to talk. And he really started to hear me and hear about the struggles that I was having and what I needed from him. And, we worked through it. Through all of this, I was pumping, of course, because my child was only 2 months at the time, like just about to be 3 months. So I decided to dump because I was like, I am so mentally spent to have to figure out how to get this milk back to California was just not happening. So even though it was difficult, I pumped and dumped there, and it actually was kind of freeing to just not have to worry about it. However, I overpumped myself right into what I thought was mastitis at the time, but it was just a painful clogged duct. So overall, the trip was between the diarrhea and the clogged duct. It wasn't great on the surface, but it was exactly what we were needed to get ourselves back on track. In the meantime, my kids were having the time of their lives with their auntie and their grandma. Every time I called, they were just so happy, saw pictures of them going to the park and all these things that they were not doing before because their parents were stressed and angry and exhausted. So it really just showed me that I could leave and they would be okay, and that it was actually beneficial for me to take care of myself in this way because they deserve a happy, healthy mom. They deserve parents that are not bickering all the time. And, they had a better time once we were taking our break to take care of ourselves, right? So we came back and I started pelvic floor physical therapy because the pain was just too much. I really just could not function. she recommended that I go to a special massage therapist and start again weekly massages. I bought a bunch of equipment. I had a TENS unit to help with the coccyx pain that I was having, just to take care of my body better, because that stuff really just needed time. It did get better with time, but the physical therapy and all of the things that I bought to help it just made the time less painful. Like there was no need for me to just struggle through waiting for my body to heal. And, I stopped all the non-essential commitments. I started taking call and just focus on healing myself. And very soon after we returned from Mexico, I had a mom fail, right? My son, as I mentioned, was back in school, and I thought there was no school for some reason, like they had some event. And then when I checked, he actually have school, and I'd already scheduled our nanny to come in early. Like I did all this stuff. So I was just like, damn, I felt so guilty that I messed this up, really out of proportion to what the situation was. But whatever, I was postpartum and hormonal. And I was whining to my husband about it. And he looked at me and said, what could I have done to avoid this from happening? I could have checked the calendar. And that's when it clicked to me that Mexico was exactly what we needed, because that is not something he would have ever said to me before that trip, before we talked, and before he really understood what I needed from him. So I was just like, okay, we're going to be okay. Right. And I remember telling my friend, I'm now starting to settle and I have energy for things that I didn't have before. And I really had to kind of let things go. Right. So they didn't suddenly start doing every single thing that I needed them to do, but it started to become less important that it was done exactly how I needed it to be done. Right. The children were alive. It was fine. So yeah, that was my postpartum story. And, it didn't just magically get better and everything was fine and hunky dory after that. Like I still had some sleep issues. I was still battling some anxiety. And like a true physician patient, I never actually went to get evaluated. I just knew how I was feeling and tried to evaluate and treat myself. I did start seeing a therapist, and she was not happy that I was doing that and actually encouraged me to get myself into my PCP and do all the things that I was supposed to be doing. But what I was the most surprised about was that during all of this, I didn't feel depressed or what I thought depression felt like. I felt rage. Like I was very, very angry, and I was just surprised by that. So I don't know if I was quote unquote depressed because of the fatigue and the resentment and the pain, or if it was just postpartum rage. Like, I don't know. Like I said, I never went to get evaluated. Those were all the things that I had to continue working on as I continued on in my postpartum journey. And so, if you have heard me talk about my postpartum story before, this may seem very different. And I left things out, like I said, to protect my husband's image, but I also blocked things out. And the reason that I'm able to even tell this with so much detail now is because of my friend P. Like she was my lifeline through it all. And the timeline of all of these things was documented in our WhatsApp chat, right? I really did not remember a lot of these things that happen, which again is something I'm going to need to talk to my therapist about. But, she really kept me going. She made me feel seen. She validated my feelings. She allowed me to bitch and complain to her, to troubleshoot things. And, it was good to have somebody that I can trust to hold a non-judgmental space for me. And yes, I had my amazing support of my sisters and my mom. But there's something different when you have this shame that you have to deal with these things, that you have to convince your husband that you need a certain amount of help and that you can't handle it all. And then also, like, I didn't want to poison the idea of my husband. So I didn't want to go into all these details. I mean, I did it later on, but there was just a little bit of a barrier there. So it was really good to have my friend be there for me. And it is why I stress so much about the importance of community and your village during this time, because I really don't think I would have made it through without her. Right. So now you have an idea about why I do what I do. The journey does not end there, like I said, but I'll talk about that in later episodes. So keep listening, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of my story, and share with a friend and give Stethoscopes and Strollers a 5-star review so others can find us and we could continue to build our virtual community together. And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you feel a little more seen and a lot less alone. If you love what you heard, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop us a 5-star review. They really make a big difference and it helps other physician moms find us too. And share this episode with your friends. It's all about spreading the support and keeping the conversation going. See you on the next episode of Stethoscopes and Strollers.